Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jaya Kula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are.
Could you talk about power and powerlessness?
Well, the word for power in Sanskrit is what? Do you know?
No, I don't.
You do, but it's just so common.
Oh, Shakti?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Shakti pervades everything, or everything is pervaded by Shakti. Shakti is giving rise to all phenomena. All phenomena equally are filled with Shakti. They're filled with the power and the capacity of this alive, aware reality. However, we each have a unique dimension also. Our unique dimension is like the pattern that's imposed on that unlimited Shakti for the purpose of making all these weird phenomena, including ourselves. The artistry of God. What that means is that we might experience powerlessness, but we aren't powerless. We're having that experience. On a relative level, we are also never powerless. And this has been expressed so many different ways in different cultures, but there's always some move we can make. No matter how limited our circumstances are, there's always some movement that we can make toward more freedom. That's our great power. No one can really take from you the ability to use your practice in any circumstance, to be in the state of your practice in any circumstance, including a concentration camp or some other horrendous situation. And this, of course, is the experience of some of the people that have been incarcerated, or Tibetan lamas who have been in Chinese labor camps, where even that circumstance, we have the power to help us to find greater access to that primordial freedom. We may be locked up in relative terms, but we always have access to that primordial freedom. I think a better question for us when we're trying to bring circumstances onto our path, this is what we're taught to do. Namkhai Norbu just expressed this very simply when he said over and over again, we work with circumstance. What does that mean? It means looking for the open door. It means looking for what is the move that's possible here. It means something that I call practical positivity. Practical positivity isn't stupid positivity. It's not just saying everything's going to be fine. Isn't that terrible when you're in horrible pain and someone says everything's going to be fine? Practical positivity is we're going to actually find the practical, appropriate thing we can do in whatever circumstance we're in, even if our circumstances are very limited. And then we keep going along like that. And this is how we bring our circumstances onto our path. We remain as much as we can in the state of our practice, which means we have to actually practice to be able to remain in the state of our practice. Turns out, unfortunately for some of you. And then we look for what is the practical, appropriate way that we can move in this circumstance. So we're never actually powerless. We may not have the form of power that we want to have, but railing against that is not being in the state of our practice. We have to be real about our circumstance and what's possible and what's not possible. And then we work with that. That's how we deal with powerlessness and powerfulness. One of the wonderful things that happens when you do a lot of practice is that you lose the sense that you have individual energy. That sense of Shakti, you start to experience your own energy as just continuous with that larger energy. And your sense of embodiment really changes, which is super fun.
I wanted to ask about nervousness as opposed to anxiety. I'm curious whether nervousness is more like fear or overwhelm or confusion sometimes, where I'm using it to hide from something.
Nervousness and anxiety to me are the same thing. And neither of them is like fear. They're both protections from being too afraid. Anxiety and nervousness just go around and around, and they keep you enmeshed in your thoughts and in your sensations, and they actually are a way of controlling things. Not a good way, but fear, on the other hand, is a wild card. Fear is just an incredibly alive and rich circumstance, and fear is a wonderful thing to practice with. But it is going like a bullet train. It does not go around in circles. It's like lightning or thunder, or it cuts through things. It doesn't have that circularity or that sense of working a problem. It's like, boom, and it just blasts all your thoughts out of you, basically. I think of fear as what nervousness and anxiety are trying to hold at bay, or a sense of groundlessness. So if we're nervous or anxious, we're very involved with our thoughts usually, and that gives us a ground. Or we're worrying about our sensations, like people do that too. We're feeling uncomfortable and worrying about that. That gives us a ground to stand. It gives us a container, almost. There's other ways of describing those conditions. Are both vata conditions. They're about disorganized inner winds, so we can talk about them on that level too. But fear takes our ground away. Fear is like a free fall in an elevator shaft. I don't know if it's uncomfortable because it's so powerful that there's almost no time to actually be uncomfortable when you're truly, truly in a state of fear. And I don't think many of us are in a state of fear very often. It's just not something in our insulated lives. Unless something extraordinary happens in our day-to-day lives, most of us are not experiencing that kind of wild fear. But when we do, it's such an opportunity to practice.
Can you give an example of a kind of fear that we could have and that's not so overwhelming, that we still realize, oh, this is wonderful, now I can work with fear?
This is coming out of my personal experience because I used to be very afraid to fly when I was in my 20s and 30s, to the point where I would curl up in a fetal position on the plane. It was terror. Eventually, I learned how to do certain kinds of meditation. I started practicing more seriously, and then I started doing this open-eyed form of meditation on the plane when the plane was taking off and in the air, and just letting the fear completely loose, trying not to tense up against it and just letting it. I can't really describe what happened in an adequate way, but I saw God. I met God. It was incredible. Everything just cleared away. Everything that was in the way of that perception of reality and what it is cleared away. It just went poof. It was like meeting God. And then after that, I wasn't afraid on planes. I won't say that I didn't feel any anxiety around it, because I still do feel a little anxiety around it, but I don't think anything more than any other normal person does, because what I was feeling was not normal. Basically, it related to me feeling that people weren't taking care of each other, and my whole fear was no one was taking proper care of the plane. It related to a lot of other things, but just this very deep fear and grief about that, because it's actually true. People aren't taking good enough care of each other. But I deflected it onto these mechanical things. It was a weird thing. But in any case, it was a great opportunity. After that, I could not wait to fly again. I was like, wow, this is the greatest opportunity to practice ever. And it's actually part of the tradition. In the old text of the tradition, there's practice with very, very strong feelings, very strong sensations, including sexual sensation, but also fear and disgust. fear is actually the number one thing that it is recommended practicing with. But of course, we don't like fear. So here in the West, we just picked up on the sex part. We have all this neo-tantra that thinks that it's about having sex. I used to joke around, no one would go to a Marin weekend workshop about being very, very scared. You know, who would pay for that, right? But fear is actually the bigger thing. Some of my teachers did put us deliberately in circumstances that were very scary. None of them were as scary to me as flying. That was a blessing for me. I ended up feeling, wow, in my ordinary life, I don't get those opportunities to be that afraid. It was just such a blessing.
I've been thinking about how we're all God and we're tasting reality, and it's like a theater and it's fun and it's interesting. I don't understand how God would want to taste being a fascist monster. I can't rationalize it.
Okay. I want to say that's really hypocritical, but not really, because probably you've just never thought of this before, so it's not really hypocritical. But tell me about the horrible things you enjoy watching in the movies.
Oh, I do. You're right. Okay. Question answered.
We're entertained by mass murderers, rapists, genociders, people who blow up whole countries, bullies, all kinds of monsters, people being ripped to shreds, horror movies, all kinds of devastating emotional things happening to people in serious dramas, which I never watch, by the way, but I love a good shredding. We are reflections of God. We've just decided that this is real and that's not. They aren't the same, but they're both creative productions in different mediums. It's really fun to think about how weird it is, how very, very weird it is that we enjoy all that stuff in the movies and in plays and things like that. Whereas we absolutely think they're horrible in what we have declared as real life. Now, when you think about it, when you go to the movies, let's say you're watching a more serious drama. It's about a woman who suffered domestic abuse and blah, 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 whatever the movie is, and you're crying. You love to cry at that movie. And you go home and you say, oh, it was so good, I cried through the whole thing. So I bring this up because sometimes when people contemplate this teaching, they think because there's this aspect of reality enjoying all of this, that means there's no sorrow, no outrage, any of those kinds of feelings. But just like you enjoy every kind of feeling while watching a movie, or you enjoy getting outraged at stuff on the internet, oh my God, can you believe what Trump said? There's horror and outrage and sorrow. We are also enjoying those feelings, whether at the movies or otherwise. So if you want to know what God is doing, just look at what we're doing. Or if you want to know what we're really doing, think about it in terms of it being an aspect of this intelligent reality's life ways. We're all doing the same thing. We are God doing God things. I sometimes say this is what God does. We are what God does. God's creative playground. And the reason why do we have these horrible things? Because that's part of creativity too, as we know. If we went into a museum and every painting was pretty people and flowers, we'd be like, wow, what a crappy museum. Or every novel was just about nice people doing nice things and being nice to each other.
I'm kind of curious the difference between healthy boundaries and boundaries when you're closed off and based in fear, and how you can tell the difference.
I just want to talk about functional boundaries. Boundaries that keep you in a state of fear or anger or whatever. Those are not functional. But there are functional boundaries that don't affect our ability to feel kindly towards other people. So sometimes we're in situations where we have to set boundaries with people or rules, or we have to remove ourselves from people's presence, and that's a very healthy thing to do. It can even be a compassionate thing to do. But we want to be able to do that in a functional way that's not establishing a boundary in us. It's just a boundary, a rule, almost like a protocol, so that we're not wasting our energy and people aren't getting hurt and we're not getting hurt. We want to get to the point where we are able to do that without shutting down an ability to feel kindly toward people, regardless of what condition they're in. I'm not saying you should be able to do that. I'm just saying the discourse around boundaries right now is very psychologized. There's a lot of emotions that are attached to those conversations about boundaries that are really about shutting down energetically and shutting down in certain ways that don't really have anything to do with this kind of practice. They don't have anything to do with where we want to end up anyway. The best place to end up is being able to set conditions when they need to be set, but not closing down in other ways that are more primordial. There's nothing wrong with saying you can't be around something or someone, but it needs to be almost a neutral thing in a way. That's where we would want to, like a neutral functional thing, not something that's blamey or damns the other person. We are just limited beings. None of us are enlightened, including myself. We can't be around everything and everyone. Maybe some saintly other type of human could do that, but we don't have unlimited capacity or skill. When we're setting those kind of boundaries that just recognize our own limitations, then we're just being honest and compassionate to ourselves and other people. But it doesn't have to come with shutting down emotionally. It's just something to head for in the future after you've done 10 years of practice. Satsang with Shambhavi is produced by Jaya Kula, a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. If you enjoyed listening, please help us keep this podcast and many other teachings open to all by making a monthly or one-time donation. Visit jayakula.org to make a donation and explore more of our offerings.